Now we're moving on to the second part of our training where we're going to actually be recording and editing the script that you've come up with and you've already designed. So we're looking at the different sort of software and hardware out there for you to use for the production, planning, and the post-production of the podcast itself. So there are lots of different softwares out there right now that you can use to record, and I've picked just a few of them here that I wanted to highlight. So Anchor itself is a really great free app that you can put on either Apple or Android, and it's really, really simple. And if you are just kind of dipping your toe into podcasting and learning about it right now, and you're starting from scratch, I think this is a really great place to start. Anchor is really, really simple to use. Basically, everything you need is in your smartphone, and it does a lot of the work for you. So you just download the app, create an Anchor account, and it will let you pretty much just set up your podcast. It provides free art, free background music, transitional music, and it does a lot of the editing and post-production things for you that you would have to do manually with more advanced software like Adobe Audition. So for instance, when you pick the free background music you want to have in one of your podcasts, Anchor automatically adjusts your volumes so that when you begin to speak, the background music will actually kind of lower itself. And then when you finish, it rises back up again. So it's really convenient that way. It also has a direct way for you to publish. So after you finish your podcasting, you publish and it'll send it to the particular hosting site that you've selected. So it's really about as easy as it gets. And if you're just starting out and just kind of want to mess around with this a little bit, Anchor is your way to go. Audacity is another free software that you can use. You just pretty much just download it onto your computer. It's an open source program, and it is also pretty simple to use. A little bit more complicated, but not too bad. And like I mentioned before, Adobe Audition is kind of probably as complicated as anybody's going to get at this level of podcasting, and it is what professionals use in both to create podcasts, but also to clean up audio from video. So if you're familiar with Adobe Premiere Pro, which is their video recording software, if you're making a movie or making a video in Premiere Pro and your audio sounds kind of rough, you can directly link it into Adobe Audition, clean it up, and then stick it back in Premiere Pro. So it's often used for that as well. And then GarageBand, and there's more, like I said, there's more software out there that you can use to record. Just keep in mind that a podcast is different from an audio recording in that you're really setting up that RSS feed to have the direct subscription to your students. So here's a quick look, just a screen capture of what the Audacity sort of control panel looks like. And this is much more advanced than Anchor, but still nowhere near as advanced as Adobe Audition. But you can see here you have your sound waves where you would just insert your audio file, and then you have sort of basic editing capabilities here. So you can split audio, connect audio, get rid of dead air, things like that. So if you're recording and you have a big stretch of time where you're just going, you can go back and cut all of that out. So if you're looking for a very formal, clean production, that's something you can do. Though there is something to be said that keeping it casual and keeping in, human pauses and things like that can be more appealing to students. And this is a quick look at the Adobe Audition work panel. And you can see this is much more an advanced sort of screen. And for the sake of this training, I actually cut additional work panels that were at the bottom here. So they're not even in here. So this is extremely complex. This is one of the video reference panels, and this can be very, very daunting. If you don't have a lot of experience with Adobe, then I think that Anchor is probably a better place for you to start. That being said, this isn't unlearnable. Anybody can learn this, and there's a lot of training out there that can help you, particularly with Wake Tech employees. If you want to learn Adobe Audition as a Wake Tech employee, you have access to lynda.com, which is a professional development website. And on lynda.com, there is a plethora of Adobe Audition tutorials that you can go through and learn. So it's not something that you can't conquer. You certainly can. It's just whether or not you want to devote your time to doing so. I put the link to lynda.com on the training website. So the basic steps of creating a podcast here is your planning, pre-production, recording, post-production, and publishing. So planning obviously is kind of just getting together what you want to do. What's the purpose? What's the point of your podcast, and thinking through exactly what you want it to accomplish. In pre-production would be writing your script and things like that. Recording, obviously, is recording. Post-production, this is probably where you're going to spend a lot of your time going through, cleaning up the audio, making sure that your background's not humming, that there's not a lot of dead air, and just that you sound pretty clear and crisp. So we really want to take the time to find a nice quiet place to record. And then publishing, as we talked about a little bit before in the training overview, this is publishing to both the Podcatcher, but also specifically for Wake Tech employees into Blackboard. So this is just a slide that I have set up. You can come back and look at this more on your own time, but pretty much the idea here is that the human brain is much more suited to process and accept bad visual representations than audio representations. So here there's a clip of Old New York, and if you're watching it, it's not a clear clip. It's obviously very old. Bits are quite shiny, distorted, but you can kind of watch it and it's not a totally unpleasant experience. Whereas if you listen to audio that's very, very badly recorded, it's fading in and out, the volume's jumping all over the place, it's almost a painful experience, and people are very more likely to step away from that audio. So think about that when you're recording your podcast. Is this something that is deeply unpleasant for your students to listen to? And if it is, then they're not going to listen to it, and you're wasting both your time and their time. So kind of just really take care to find a nice quiet place to record, avoid a lot of background noise, speak in your normal speaking voice, and make it as pleasant as possible, because otherwise you're going to lose them before you really even get started. Length. The literature dealing with educational podcasts really kind of differs here. Some people say that just like with videos, you want to stick in that 3 to 5 minute range. Other research has dictated that really it doesn't matter. It's just about whether you can hook them in those first few minutes and then they'll stay through and listen. And then, obviously, I think personally I recommend don't make it any longer than it needs to be. Deliver your information in a concise way and let students process it, as easily as possible. So if you can explain something in depth the way that you need to in 6 minutes, that's fine. Don't take 20 minutes to do it. So just kind of keep it in mind that it is more than likely, research has shown that the shorter it is, the more likely there are to listen to it in its entirety. Style. This can vary depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So this is a very informal style that I'm recording this screencast in. I'm speaking in my normal voice, and I'm not going to go back and, edit everything out. I don't have a script word for word verbatim of what I'm saying. I have big points that I want to touch on. But this casual sort of informal tone, actually, research has studied, appeals most to students. They want to hear you as a person. That being said, sure, there is also a place and a time for a formal podcast where you are just directly leading or reading from a script, but keep in mind that can become monotonous and people can tend to zone out. So you may want to stick with a more informal tone, even if you are delivering a lecture, just a little bit more off the cuff, maybe just having bulleted notes that you're reading from and kind of riffing off of, rather than reading word for word from a script, which is unfortunately might put people to sleep. And that ties into voice and tone. Like I said before, speak in your normal speaking voice. Don't try to sound like you're on NPR. Just be yourself, and avoid really drastic changes in pitch. Speed. Similar to videos, we know that students actually respond better to a brisk pace. If you've ever watched a lot of educational videos from professional production companies like Crash Course History, I think, or the Khan Academy, they're pretty fast. So it's a similar sort of thing here. You want to keep people on their toes. If you go too slow, you're going to lose them. Also, don't go so fast that they're not able to keep up. So you want to hit that kind of happy medium, a little bit on the fast side. And for effects, like I said when I was talking about Anchor, background music and sound effects and transitional music, those are all great things that you can use in your podcast. But keep in mind the material that you're conveying and the purpose of the podcast, and if those sort of effects are going to become distractions. Some research has indicated that students do have a hard time, or some students do have a hard time kind of tuning out background music. So maybe, depending on the purpose of your podcast, you may just want to keep it quiet in the background.